teach at a progressive independent school called City and Country School down in the West Village. Although when I first came to New York City, I was working in New York City public schools for the first 3 years of my teaching career. Looking forward to being here. It's been a while, and welcome. All right.
Right, you want to pick someone to go? Yep.
I was just gonna say, hi Gail, nice to meet you. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I graduated in the class of 1971, so I'm one of the older ones here. I majored in French and Spanish in secondary education, and I'm retired. I taught, was in education for 34 years, taught French and Spanish at the beginning, middle school, and then mostly high school. And I got my master's in counseling, and then I became a school counselor. And I did that for 25 years of my career. Okay, so I will choose someone. Bridget.
Hi everybody, Bridget Connolly Howe, class of 8. I was an English adolescent major, and for the first couple of years of my career, I taught in Rockland County in New York. And shortly after, I was diagnosed with a rare degenerative vascular illness called VEDS. So although that I can no longer teach full-time, I'm still involved substituting, which sounds crazy, but I actually love it. And tutoring, as well as I'm teaching with an organization called Best Brains in Latham, and a local BOCES program where I am in upstate New York right now. So I'm trying to, do something related to my field as much as I can, as much as my health permits. So nice to see everybody. And I will popcorn to Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Tysot, 7. I was an adolescence education and history major. I got my master's in special education, so I am a special education transition teacher in Southern Arizona. I'm from New Jersey. I just decided to, hightail it across the country.
And who would you like to pick to go next?
The other Michelle.
Hi. So I'm Michelle. I'm class of 2011. I teach for the New York City Department of Ed, 5th grade ICT English and Social Studies class. And I will send it to Jen.
Hi, Jen Roche Joyce, class of 1. I actually got my master's from Elmira as well. So my bachelor's was in art education, my master's was in general education, and I still think I hold one of the longest titles as a graduate assistant, the coordinator of recreational and weekend programming. And after I left DC, I went up to Plattsburgh. I taught a little bit of art education there, and then kind of turned my direction to early education. And I was doing that for 16 years. And I think my professional path has led me to my current, I'm at SUNY Oswego, and I'm teaching courses to the first year experience students. So I'm teaching transitional courses into college, and next semester, a face-to-face class, hopefully, will be career exploration. I will pop it over to Courtney.
Hi, I'm Courtney Buchanan, class of 8. I got my degree in adolescent education and French. My master's is in K-12 ENL, English as a new language. I also have a special ed certification. Currently, right now, I am teaching ENL. I'm also teaching a 15-1 math class, and I also do RTI math. And I will pass it off to Heather.
Heather, I think you're on mute. All right, Courtney, I'll pick somebody. Michaela, can you go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Johnson, 17. I am also coming to you from the purple bubble. I graduated with my degrees in childhood education and math. I headed to Rochester for a while after graduating and worked toward my master's, which I'm about to finish up pending a thesis, at the University of Rochester's Warner School of Ed in teaching and curriculum. I am currently working at EC. If any of you remember Colleen Jacobson, I kind of filled her shoes when she retired this past year. So I'm teaching introductory level math classes here at EC. And I will popcorn it to Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Higgy, 19. I graduated with a BA in adolescent education, English Lit, and social studies. And I'm currently working on my master's from EC as well in literacy. And I'm teaching 7th grade ELA in North Carolina. And I will popcorn it to Sydney.
I knew you were going to do that. I'm Sydney Stringham, 19. And for my undergraduate, I was adolescent education, history, and social studies. And I'm now doing my master's at EC in general education, and I am the graduate assistant in the Office of Alumni Relations, and I popcorn to Dr. Johnson.
Here we go. So hello, everyone. It's so great to see all these people. This is really wonderful. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So I am a professor of adolescence education at Elmira. I started at Elmira in the fall of 2014, and I received tenure last year, which is really exciting. And yeah, so I have a lot of students. Anyone who's 14 or later, I've had on this call, which is great. And I will pop it over to Gary.
Gary, I think you're on mute. We'll give you a minute. If not, we can go ahead and move on to someone else. Okay. Carol, would you like to go? You're on mute, Carol. I managed to
I do it all
read sure.
Sorry, I'm class of 70. Gail, you look familiar. I graduated with a degree in education, got a master's from Penn State, and then taught in New York State for a while, and then took a long break into telecommunications, and now come full circle, and now I'm back in education on the special ed side.
Great.
And I'll popcorn to, let's see, who have we heard from? Looks like we've heard from a lot.
I think we need Jennifer, Emily.
Okay, Jennifer.
Jennifer, would that be me?
Yeah.
I thought it was another Jen. So.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Just, Jennifer's such a common name that you don't know who, if there's more than one Jennifer on the call, you don't know who they're talking about.
Right.
Well, hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Ingold. I'm class of 1995 from Elmira, and my parents actually lived in Elmira for a long time. So Elmira was my transfer school. I transferred into Elmira as a junior from a satellite campus of Syracuse University. And interesting story, like I started out as a business management major and switched to education in the middle of my junior year because I had a not so good relationship with accounting. Accounting was that class that changed my life, that actually showed me that maybe I needed to go on a different path. But Elmira was definitely the place for me to do that. I credit being in education today to going to Elmira, because I think that if I had not transferred to Elmira and had the experiences that I had there, I would not be where I am today. So excited to be here tonight and share my journey with you, because it's pretty cool. So nice to meet everybody. Oh, by the way, I currently teach 8th grade social studies at Bayshore Middle School on Long Island in New York, but upstate girl, born and bred, and after I graduated college and worked for 1 year upstate, met my husband. And that's why I'm Long Island. But you know what they say, you can take upstate, you know, you could take me out of upstate, move me down here, but I will always be an upstate girl at heart. So. Oh, I'm sorry. And I don't even know who's left, so I'm going to pass it back to Megan so she can pick somebody else.
Okay. Amy, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Amy Walker, and I graduated the class of '87 with a major in foreign languages, Spanish and Italian. And I've been teaching since basically '88, '90 at Syracuse University, the English Language Institute. It's an intensive program for international students to learn English.
Great. And I think that just leaves us with Emily.
Hi, everyone. I think I may join Megan as the only person who is not in education here. So I'm Emily Bush, 18, graduated with a bachelor's in biology in 2018. And I'm currently a third-year medical student at the Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. And although I am not, you know, explicitly in education, I find that one of the reasons I went into medicine was to educate my patients on how to take care of themselves and how to make informed decisions about their healthcare, which involves a lot of education. And that's kind of my path. And so I'm calling in from the Upper Peninsula. So.
Wow. Great. Okay. So was there, oh, Diana, I don't think you had a chance to go. Would you like to introduce yourself? I think you're on mute.
Oh.
Diana, you need to unmute yourself. Should be in the bottom left corner of your screen. There you go.
There you go. All right, I'm just an interested bystander. I graduated in '66, went elementary and taught for like 30 years in the Rochester, New York area, and I'm retired. And I'm just interested in what's going on now.
Great. All right, was there
So
anybody
that's
else
it
who
for
wanted
me.
to? Perfect. Anybody else who wanted to introduce themselves who didn't get a chance?
Megan, I think Heather just joined us. So Heather, welcome. And would you like to give a little information about your class year and what your major was and where you are now?
So Heather had IM'd that her microphone doesn't work, so she's not able to speak back to us.
She put her introduction in the chat. Here, let me see.
Oh,
I will
perfect.
introduce her on behalf. My name is Kristen. I graduated in 2002. I am from Central New York, and I'm in my 18th year as a speech language pathologist at a public elementary school. Welcome.
Great. Thanks. All right. Anyone else? Okay. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So our first speaker is going to be Jennifer. So Jennifer is an 8th grade social studies teacher at Bayshore Middle School in Bayshore, New York. She received the Long Island Council of the Social Studies Middle School Teacher of the Year Award in 2016 and numerous awards in 2019, including the New York State Council for the Social Studies Outstanding Middle School Teacher of the Year Award. She was invited by Mr. John Lee, one of the creators of the National C3 Framework, to be a lead blogger expert. Jennifer is also very engaged with community service. She is involved in being a cooperating teacher to student teachers from local colleges and universities on Long Island. She is the founding patron of the Geraldine Ingold Young Professional Memorial Scholarship, a local scholarship given annually to a graduating senior in the West Islip School. She also was recently asked to become the new communications chairperson on the board of directors of the Middle States Council for Social Studies. So Jennifer, you can take it away.
Okay, my connection for some reason is not stable, it looks like. So I'll apologize if I'm freezing. Am I supposed to share my screen? I'm guessing yes. Right?
Yep, go ahead. If you have something to share, I think you should be able to, hopefully. Perfect.
Okay, you can see my screen?
Oh, I see me really big on your screen.
Okay.
There we go. That's better.
Oh, hopefully I can get this to work.
It's the best.
There we go.
Hi, I'm a middle school teacher. And this is my crazy life. But you know what? It's the best. Because there is no place that I would rather be. Truthfully, my name is Jennifer Ingold, and I teach 8th grade at Bayshore Middle School on Long Island in New York. Every school year presents its share of challenges, but remote learning, well, this promises to be fun. Because surviving middle school is, well, tough. It just is, even in the best of circumstances. But enduring these issues with remote learners, it's going to require us to rewrite the rules, just a little bit. So as they say in the land of middle school, no risk, no reward. And if we are to help remote learners, certainly in learning and in life, we need to model the kind of creative, resourceful, and out-of-the-box thinking necessary for them to be successful. After all, we are middle school teachers, and I'm convinced that together, there is nothing we can't do. So from one middle school teacher to another, go get them. And let's do this. Let's continue to make middle school the best years.
Okay, that actually was part of a presentation. Can you guys see me? You still see my screen okay? Megan, we still good? So that was part of a presentation that I did for American Middle Level Educators Association from this past October. And the slide you saw in the middle, I thought I would share with you this evening, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on. I mean, obviously all of you are aware of what's going on in education right now, but sort of the joke has been, these are the things, there have always been things that you feel like, you know, this is all the stuff they didn't teach you in college, right? I don't think anybody certainly could have prepared themselves for what the remote learning or hybrid learning world would look like, or what education would currently look like right now. But certainly it's been an opportunity for us to rewrite the rules. So going into this school year with all the unknowns, I sat and asked myself over the summer, okay, well, I didn't know at the time if I was going to be a virtual teacher, which I am, all of my students are completely online, or a hybrid teacher doing face-to-face, or just even what my position was going to look like. So I had to begin to think about how to transition what I would normally do into what we were, you know, currently looking to do this school year. So I broke it down into 3 simple rules when I talked about rewriting the rules. First of all, visuals and repetition. Thinking about all the things that I normally would hand out my students, you know, the first days of school, the syllabuses and all the forms, and take this home and show it to your parents and that sort of thing. And when you started to think about all the amounts of paper that you normally would hand out to students, how do you do that in a virtual world, or, and or how do you simplify that for yourself with everything that, the kids are going through right now and everything that families are going through. So in order to do that, I said to myself, okay, well, I'm still going to give out my syllabus. I'm still going to put it online, but it's a rather lengthy packet. It's probably about 12 pages. So I still gave them the packet, but I also gave them a visual syllabus, which looked like this. I said to myself, okay, what is it that kids and families really need to know and or need to know how to do to be successful in my class? So I took all of the important points from my big syllabus and I put them into this visual syllabus, which many kids found to be extremely helpful. And, families, I got a lot of positive feedback on that as well, because it made everything so easy for them. Easy to navigate, easy to figure out, easy the first couple of days to come back and ask questions about. And the other thing I did was with the big syllabus, I assigned maybe 2 pages a night to them. And then I would give them, mini Google Forms opportunities for them and or their parents to ask questions about the bigger pieces in the syllabus. But this wound up being kind of my go-to thing, and it worked out really well. The next thing to think about was, okay, well, in a virtual world, staying connected becomes increasingly difficult. So you want kids to not only stay connected to each other, you want them to also stay connected to, the school and the district as much as possible, as well to their communities, and, in a time when certainly everybody is feeling very isolated. So another thing that I decided to do was I added a visual schedule to my practice, which has been extremely successful, because along with giving the kids, telling them every day, this is what your assignment is. I give this to them at the beginning of every week. As you can see, it maps out what we're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I broke the class down into curriculum and content. Another activity that I came up with during the shutdown that I call Survivor Quarantine Edition, which is a bunch of task-based activities, project-based activities that are theme related, that the kids love. And then the last part of this is assessments. So this tells the kids exactly what they are going to be assessed and graded on every single, day, if there's an assessment for that particular day, or, what assessments are coming up for that particular week. Another thing that is extremely helpful for them as well, because again, remember, they're extremely overloaded with the amount of, whether it's, Google Classroom information or just information that's being given to them from a number of different places. Everything that I give to them, I always put my email address on, how to personally contact me, so that the kids can stay connected to me. If they need help or their parents need help, I always put, a link on there that helps parents stay connected to not only what's going on with their kids, but what's going on in the class. And then again, as I said before, especially for virtual kids, it's so important for them to continue, if they're at home, to stay connected to their school and to their school community, that I put it, a link here that helps them to be able to connect with what's going on in school and in their school community as much as they want. So this is available to them and easily accessible to them every single week. Another thing that I did was I built a website. I did have this website prior to anything having to do with COVID, but what I did was I actually, revamped it a little bit. I revamped the parent connection page, and I also revamped Survivor Quarantine Edition has its own page as well. Another thing that I did was I created a toolkit, Social Studies Survival Toolkit, which I'm going to talk about in just a couple of minutes, because one of the last things that I'll talk to you about tonight when we think about the situation we're currently in is, as educators, we're always asking ourselves, what have we learned? Because we're always looking for the lesson and the message and everything. And one of my biggest takeaways from this period of time has been that it's not enough to make a fair and equitable education available to kids. It has to be accessible to them also from just about everywhere. So how do we do that in this kind of an environment? And really the easy answer is, well, we have to give them tools. And that's something I know we talk about building toolkits. That's something I know that educators have done, for a long time now. But certainly when we talk about the types of tools, learning tools that kids would need for this type of environment, especially if they are 100% virtual, they tend to look a little bit different. And again, when we talk about tools, we're not just talking about tools for just our students, we're talking about tools for parents too. Now, again, I teach middle school. So when you talk about, surviving anything, parents also need a survival manual when you have a middle schooler as well. So what I did was I designed what I call a social studies survival handbook. And what it does is, it's actually my guide. It's a classroom guide to how to learn social studies in a convenient book. And it functions just like a book. When you open it up, the pages turn. This is all valuable information for them about my class. This is actually a reference table for enduring issues for social studies. This is part of the new standards that were created about 3 years ago by the Board of Regents. And so when that shift happened, and of course the C3 framework and the IDM model, social studies got more involved with those pieces as well. This was my way to help middle school students to connect with these rather difficult concepts prior to going to high school and really having to dive deep into them and utilize them. So this helps them along with that process. The rest of the book is devoted to, again, helping them to learn how to think like a historian and acquire those valuable historical thinking skills that they need to not only complete their assignments, whether they would be in class or virtually, but then also how to write an essay. And everything with, one of my biggest themes is, how did the pieces fit together? So when we do history, history is about a historical investigation. We're always doing some sort of investigation. So we take pieces and we talk about, pieces of history in various time periods. And then we talk in the end, we discuss how those pieces fit together. And then the rest of the book helps them to collectively start to be able to learn how to discuss their opinions. And it basically breaks it down for them by sentence. And you can see here there's AR2 and ACT3 on the side. These are all pieces of the directions of the new Regents exam, things that kids have to learn how to do. But they are rather complex, especially for a middle schooler, if you just sort of take directions and keep throwing complex directions at them. So what I did was I took the complex directions and broke them down into exactly what the kids needed to know how to do. And I made a fun little acronym for them to remember that basically they could go into any exam with or any situation with. They could write this on the top of their paper. And then each one of these letters reminds them, okay, this is what I have to remember to do. So this goes all the way through to conclusions. You can see here it gives them an opportunity to do something that I call level it up. Level it up is usually something that I require the honors kids to do. But having a tool like this is great because it gives other kids, it gives kids of all levels the option to be able to challenge themselves at any time for what type of work that they would like to do. So this was created in a tool called Flip Snack. And I actually had such success with it that I made one for parents. And I called the parent one, what works best for parents? Or I'm sorry, what works best in social studies, parents edition. First, I'm going to see, I don't know if my connection here is going to be good or not, but here's the book right here. But this basically is a survival manual for parents, which is wonderful, especially for the virtual kids. Many parents really want to help their kids, but they don't know how to do that exactly. And so this is a whole self-help manual for parents. Everything from how do I navigate a Google Classroom, tips and tricks, where can I find my middle schooler's work, how can I help my middle schooler with a daily schedule, what can I expect for daily task deadlines and due dates, and then how can I best be a homeschool helper. So the rest of this in my website is devoted to just, again, resources that are translated into Spanish, anything and everything possible. advice for parents, on how to be the best support system for their kids that they can possibly be. Because again, you know, everybody, whether you were hybrid or remote, everybody could use a little bit of help and assistance in a time like this when we're all trying to do so much and navigate so much. This certainly helps everybody out. And, you know, it just reinforces this idea that we're all better together and that we're all in this together as well. So let me figure out how to, there we go. I'm like a Zoom, I'm not, you know, a Zoom connoisseur, folks. I'm used to Google Meet, but. Okay, can you see me? I think I pressed all the right buttons.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about
All right.
what I've been up to.
Great. So we plan on having some open discussion at the end of the call. So I just want to make sure we're respectful of everybody's time and get through the presentations. That way, if people need to move on with their evenings, if they need to miss open discussion, that's probably the better thing to have to step away from. So thank you so much, Jennifer. That was amazing, and very glad that I switched out of education. Not for Megan. All right, so next up we have Tyler. Tyler is a teacher of social studies at City and Country School, a progressive independent school in Manhattan, New York. But before joining the faculty at City and Country, Tyler taught in the New York City public school system, the largest in the United States. A graduate of EC and Harvard University, his personal and professional interests include civic involvement, middle-level education, critical history, and curriculum development. Tyler grounds his work in helping students to bridge their knowledge of the past in order to cultivate a more inclusive, compassionate understanding of the world around them. Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Jennifer, for launching us into this conversation. As I was looking through, I was noticing, wow, look at, we're connected. It's almost like we both teach the same grade. So I love to see that. And thank you all. I know that, you know, times are weird, and to take some time out of very busy days, especially at this time, is really, really remarkable. So thank you for giving us that time. I'm just going to share my screen really quick. And please give me feedback like I tell my kids. We're still kind of fumbling around here. You all can see that, right? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah? Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so thank you for that introduction, Megan. I appreciate it. I'm just going to dive right in. The first thing that I'm thinking about when putting this together was this is a year of tremendous reflection. And if you're a teacher especially, right, there's a lesson to be learned. And I just want to take a moment and pose this question: what has 2020 taught us? And I'd love to invite some volunteers. It's a big question. I think we've been spending the last 11 months thinking of this question, or at least I have. But what has 2020 taught you? It could be about education. It could be about yourself. It could be about something totally different. And if you feel comfortable, just unmute your mic and feel free to share.
To be flexible and go with the flow.
Flexibility, huge skill. Thank you very much, Jen. Anybody else?
I'm a people person.
Yes. And we have time for like a third.
I think I've learned patience.
That is something for me. Oh my gosh, patience. You know, I'm getting to know myself as I approach the later part of my 20s. And one of the big things is that I know about myself, I am not patient at all. So 2020 has forced me to at least try, right? Well, for me, when I was thinking about this question and thinking specifically about education, right, as a teacher, the one thing that I keep thinking about, and I've heard it somewhere, so I unfortunately cannot take credit for this, is we may be in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And down there I have, a few different identifiers, ways that people identify themselves, right? Part of your identity might be your zip code, where you grow up, your employment, race, education, housing, healthcare. Now, there's so many more that we can really, so many more boats that we could create for this. But when you take a look at it, I think that depending on the boat you're in depends on what 2020 has looked like for you. And for me as a social studies teacher, that has been something that's at the forefront of my mind in helping my students understand that. So one of the big thoughts that I have is, when thinking this, like, where do we go from here? I think that there has been a lot of tragedy in 2020. I think that's something we should name. There's been a lot of difficulty. And 2021 is around the corner, right? Some of these things COVID has caused, and some of these things COVID has merely shown a light on, right? That have been there before 2020. So I kind of want to preface this by saying that unfortunately, I don't have any one size fits all approach. If you came here looking for the answer, I can't give that to you because, I don't think there is any specific answer, right? It was mentioned that I teach here in New York City. I teach in an urban school system, right? That looks very different than where Jennifer's coming from on Long Island, or where folks are coming from in more rural areas. So I'm just gonna kind of share some of what I think we might need, no matter where we come from, that can help us. Because regardless of where we're working from, if we're still in education, we all still are tasked with our students, right? So I would be remiss if I did not include my man, John Dewey. My senior thesis, part of it is the fault of Dr. Johnson, who's on this call. Is John Dewey. He's somebody who's been very, very impactful to my studies when I was in Elmira College, and then when I was in my graduate program. And one of the things I appreciate about him is that his writing is very pragmatic. It's very to the point, and he, I think, really summed it up well when he mentioned that education is not preparation for life, it is life itself. So that is something that has led me to actually now join in my fourth year a progressive school that is dedicated to this idea, right? That school should be a microcosm of society, right? It's you're modeling for your students what to expect in the real world, right? And I think that that's something that I'm very, very passionate about. So as I said, we find ourselves, many of us do, right? Some of us are retired and probably chuckling a little bit at the teachers that are still teaching, saying, man, I am happy I am not in there right now. But those of us that are either in the classroom or going into the classroom find ourselves at a monumental inflection point in time. I certainly don't want to underestimate that. This is a massive moment that we find ourselves in. And likewise, our students have a heightened engagement towards the world around them, right? There are, in a way, the curtain is being drawn back. And I think that if we show them, right, as teachers, as educators, we really have an opportunity here. And I think it comes down to two things. Now, of course, it can be more, but when I was making this, I was thinking, ultimately, I think it comes down to our expectations as educators and the content that we teach. I mentioned here, right, our expectations for our students influence what they learn to expect from themselves, and in turn, what to expect from their communities. And content, right, the vehicle by which we open up as many worlds as possible for our students. So I think in a world of such disorder that we're finding ourselves in right now, it's important that as educators, we focus on what we do have control over, right? And it's those expectations that we come in every single day with our kids for, and the content that we are tasked with teaching, right? Gone are the days where all students are treated the same, right? I think that understanding your students and what boats they are in, what boats they find themselves in, is extraordinarily important to this work. And when it comes to content, I think that something that we should always be asking ourselves as teachers is, well, what stories are we prioritizing in our classroom, right? What are ways that we can make whatever it is that we're teaching more inclusive, especially since we're finding ourselves, you know, on technology where engaging students is a monumental task, right? So they really need to be thinking about what is the point of this, right? Not, you know, before we almost had a way to kind of get that captive audience, right? They had to come to school. And now it's a little bit, our task has become a little bit harder, right? So I think that by centering these two ideas, right, and thinking about how are we using our power to introduce our students to as many worlds as possible still rings true, even in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic. So the beautiful question that has made a lot of people a lot of money over the years is how do we get there, right? Everybody seems to have an answer or a five-step plan, right? And I think that it's a combination of a few different things. Again, I come at it from the lens of a social studies teacher, but you know, regardless of the content that you're responsible for, I think it comes down to one main point. This is a woman, Chimamanda Adichie. If you have, can you just raise your hand if you've heard of her? And I can see you on the screens. Okay, so we got a few folks. Okay, good, wonderful, preaching to the choir. If you do not know who Chimamanda Adichie is, she is a writer and she is a speaker as well. If you have not seen her TED Talk titled The Danger of a Single Story, it had a transformational effect on me as a social studies teacher. And she talks about the power of stories and the danger, as the title suggests, of a single story. I highly recommend it. It's 20 minutes long. It's one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time, and for good reason. Now, there's a part there where she talks about the power of stories, and she says, and I'm just going to quote her here, she says, "I've always felt that it is impossible to engage properly with a place or person without fully engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of identity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar." And I think for so many reasons, that quote is so applicable to where we find ourselves today, socially, politically, economically. And her words kind of are sitting in the front of my mind as I'm wondering how to teach moving forward. So it's with that for my students, I have four main objectives. And I think that this goes for, you know, any classroom. I think that, you know, there are a lot of things that might make us different, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are all tasked with the same thing, and that is to produce citizens that are ready to go out and carry the mantle, right? And take the next step and hopefully make more progress than we did. So for me, I think one of the biggest things that we as teachers should always be able to be doing is communicating purpose, right? Whether or not they're verbalizing it and saying it, students are always asking why. And we should always be prepared to answer. I feel if your students can't answer this in your lessons, and even worse, if you can't answer this, right, as teachers, then we got to reevaluate our direction, right? We should always be able to inform them why it is that we're teaching them whatever it is that we're teaching them. We owe them that much. Diversify content. Again, going back to Chimamanda Adichie, it's something I'm always wondering is in what ways are teachers actively incorporating different stories, right? How are we, going back to that boat analogy, how is it that we are getting as many boats in as possible, right? And understanding and exposing students to a variety of worlds. And I think this is especially true in literature and history when we think about who it is that we're seeing, right? Who are we shown? What stories are privileged over other stories? And I think a lot of that comes through current events. I think that as a teacher, and especially as a teacher of social studies in 2020, there is no shortage of content when it comes to current events. I have largely changed my entire curriculum to be almost entirely current event focused because that is something that catches the engagement of students. They're asking these questions about what they're seeing in the world around them. And I think it's really important that we use that to teach them about the past in the case of if you're history, right? Before I move on, just realizing I'm not used to doing this much talking. Are there any questions so far? Just to give me about 30 seconds to take a pause, because It's a lot of info. Any questions so far? All right. And if nothing else, gives me a little bit of a break. Thirdly here.
Hi, I'm Gloria. I did have a comment.
Go for it.
Yeah. What your thoughts are on, we talk about the stories.
Yeah.
We read a lot about, well, I'm reading a number of books about racism and the latest one is Caste by Isabel, I forgot her last name. Anyway, and we read about how children, and we have been taught about race and the history of race. And a lot of the history of race, especially in this country, has not been communicated. Are you changing some of your curriculum to include some of the history that they have not been taught?
Absolutely. Short answer, absolutely. I think I'm a good testament to that. So a little bit more about, speaking of stories, a little bit about my story, right? I grew up in suburban Connecticut and attended Elmira College. And you know, I think, and then went right off to grad school before coming into the classroom, right? So for me, I very much, you know, lived in a bubble for a majority of my life, right? Until moving to New York City. And when you talk about, you know, the history that we teach, I remember sitting in my history classrooms, in which I loved all of my teachers. I enjoyed my history classes so much. It's part of the reason why I now teach history. But I never really thought much about the fact that everybody that I learned about looked like me, right? Everybody, it was the same story, right? Over and over. And it wasn't until I actually moved to New York City and I taught in a school where it was entirely Black and brown students, right? A completely different environment, where I actually learned that there was a whole piece of the puzzle that I was missing, right? And that took me aback, right? Because I was kind of wondering, where was this my whole life, right? Why didn't I know about all these other cool cultures and these other stories, right? I felt that they had been left out. And so what I work to do is, you know, try to expose them to as many different, you know, perspectives as possible. And they don't need to necessarily agree with me, right? But I think that it's important that we allow them to make those decisions for themselves after providing them as much information as we can, right? As much difference to at least understand those different sides. For example, I think Dr. Johnson might have been there when, because she actually came and visited, right? And saw this. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was right before, but I mentioned I had all Black and brown students, and we read Night by Elie Wiesel. And it was about, you know, these white European Jewish folk that, again, you would think that children in Harlem would be like, what do we have in common, right? And then as you talk through, you realize that we're not all that different, right? Going back to this idea that we do have things that ground us. You know, we do have stories that are shared. We have shared expectations. We might be in different boats, but again, there are things that we do have in common. And I think that by diversifying that content, it really opens the world for them. It expands the world for them, so that they have an accurate understanding of what's out there.
Well, also we'll understand each other better if we know each other's stories.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Oh, Gloria, 100%, 100%.
I want to make one more comment.
Absolutely.
For Jennifer and you, Tyler, is I think it's so important these days to help children understand what's misinformation. What's good news. I don't want to use the word fake news because Trump uses it, but you know, what's good news and not good news? What are the good sources? And help them to try, because if they're just relying on social media, which many adults and children are, I think it's pretty hard to decipher.
Yeah, I think that's also, again, thinking back to the boat analogy again, that's an entirely different boat, right? Like, depending on where you're getting your sources depends on how you're viewing certain things that are going on. So I agree with you, and that is definitely something that my co-teacher and I are actively trying to, you know, overcome. So thank you for that. Just a final thing, because actually Gloria's questions and comments, I think she must have known where I wanted to go with this, because her conversations kind of helped.
Well, I do have one more comment.
Go for it.
One more comment, Tyler.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I think you asked initially about what we learned so far, 2020. Okay. Of course, I could say patience. Yes, definitely. Secondly, I could say gratitude for the simplest things to be grateful for.
Yes.
But I also think we're learning that democracy and complacency do not go together, and that we have to do what's necessary to help keep democracy going, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I think back, there was a friend, and I'll actually just stop sharing now, because speaking of that last bullet point where it talks about sharing stories. So I have a really good friend of mine, a dear friend, and she's she is a director of diversity and inclusion out in San Francisco. And I was speaking with her about this moment in time, reflecting with her, and I had mentioned something about, well, this too shall pass, right? I think that that's a saying that we've kind of ingrained. Oh, this will pass. This is temporary. And she added something that expanded my viewpoint and expanded my thinking, because she had said, I think to say that assumes that, progress comes without action, right? Progress comes and you can just passively sit there because it's inevitable. And I think what we're learning right now is that no progress ever comes without a little bit of sacrifice. And I think that if we're having these stories, right, we're having these conversations in our own homes, chances are that our students are as well, right? And whether we want to believe it or not, they're bringing it into the classroom, whether or not you acknowledge it. And so I think that by modeling, right, this is a real opportunity that we have to, model what the discourse we want in our nation to look like. Or let's not even look at the nation, right? Let's look at our own towns, right? Our own communities, our own blocks, right? And if you even go up to your own state, right, and work your way up, but the work begins in the classroom. And I think that this work requires a lot of vulnerability. It requires risk and discomfort, right? And I think it's all well worth it in the end. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for hearing me out.
Well, I think we have two teachers here that we can be very happy that they're in the classroom and doing their job well. I just, amen. Great.
Thank you, Gloria.
Okay.
Tyler, can I ask you a favor? I had to make you the actual host of the event.
Oh, so now you want me to give it up?
Can you give me back?
Well, what were we just saying about it doesn't come without a fight, right? No.
I know.
There you go. I'll model what I want to see.
Play nice.
Thank
We're
you.
Educators, play nice.
Working together here. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Tyler. So next up, we have Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson joined the Elmira College faculty in 2014 as a professor of education. She began her teaching career over 20 years ago as a college teacher in the People's Republic of China. After completing her master's degree in applied economics at Cornell University, she taught at Ithaca High School as a global studies and economics teacher. She returned to university to earn her PhD in education to work on the policy issues that were shaping the classrooms in which she taught. Her research is centered on how education policy decisions impact the lived experiences of people. Dr. Johnson has been a recipient of multiple awards for her teaching at EC. All right, take it away.
Great, thanks. I'm not going to spend too much time talking just because I'd like to hear more from you guys. But I think one thing that this call reminds me of is how grateful I am for the job that I have. I have a really beautiful beautiful career, and so appreciate seeing my students and seeing the students of professors who were mentors for me. So it's so great to see people who graduated years ago, and also students in other departments. Emily, you did so many great things when you were at Elmira College. So even though you weren't in education, it's great to see you on here and see what you're doing and that you're out in the world doing good things. So I do think that John Dewey's quote that Tyler brought up, that we talked about a lot in class, is helpful, just to think about what we are doing. And I think about my very first class that I taught at Elmira College in Watson 216. Tyler was in the second row, eager, ready to take notes. And I thought, wow, this is a great place to teach. So we had a great time that semester. So I thought I would just update you on things that are going on at Elmira, because I know that it's fun to hear about things that are happening on campus. So we started out the term really excited that we were going to do in-person learning and we were going to make it happen. And we spent the summer getting ready by creating a hybrid teaching model that all professors would teach. So we actually we installed cameras in every single classroom and microphones in every single classroom so that every professor could teach online and in person at the same time, so that if anybody had to quarantine, or if a student because of health reasons had to learn from their dorm room or at home, or if they couldn't get a visa to get into the United States and were taking their classes at 2 in the morning from Japan, they also could be in that Elmira College classroom with us. I think that went really well. I was very nervous about having a camera on me all the time. I will admit that. I was like, well, sometimes I say things I don't want everybody to know that I say, but it's okay. It's probably good for me. I censor a little bit. I am being videotaped. So yeah, I think it went really well. I mean, certainly there are faculty that grumble about change, because that's what faculty do everywhere, not just EC, but I think people rose to the challenge, and we did a pretty good run. I think we were on campus for 6 weeks, which was really good, because I remember being in a meeting with Carl, where I'm also now director of first year seminar. And I remember saying, this is how I want to do my orientation groups, because we designed this new orientation program for all freshmen. Now they take these short classes with their first year seminar teacher, and it rotates, and they learn different things that they need to survive on campus, like how to use IT services and College 101 skills. And now we have assessments related to this. Yes, I did implement common assessments for the first year program. But so I was worried, and I said to Carl, I do not want to be the person responsible for having the whole freshman class quarantined in the first week. So I insisted that everybody be in small groups and we not move too much. And Student Life did an amazing job just getting kids where they needed to go and providing snacks and having spaces for students to be. So I think we did really, really well as to be expected. We lasted much longer than other colleges. Then I believe it was like October 10th or something like that. Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Around that time.
Around the end of September, literally Mountain Day, and then
Mountain Day. It was
Mountain Day and distant Mountain Day.
It was a socially distant Mountain Day, but I don't think the branch was socially distant, and as a result, we did have an uptick in cases. I'm not saying it's the branch's fault, but then we did go to all the students living on campus, but the professors teaching online. And so we kind of had the experience that Jennifer talked about. And Jennifer, I did take a picture of your visual syllabus, and that will become part of my teaching next term. That was beautiful.
I actually have I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but I actually have another, if you wanted another tool that I use, I actually have a visual let's see, what do I want to call it? I was just thinking about this as you were talking. I have a visual, like a visual agenda, I guess
Oh,
is
great.
the best way for me to say it. It actually has learning target on it, important words and terms, key questions, and learning behaviors. And it's all put together on one slide that's basically interactive. So the kids can see all of that in real time. And then you introduce your lesson through talking about all those things. So they have those, each of those pieces to look out for when you go through and you continue to teach.
Oh,
so
great.
I actually start with that. And then going along with my own piece thing, I pick each of those pieces apart and interactively talk with them about that throughout the lessons that I do. With the virtual kids, it's worked so well. I mean, the stuff that I've gotten out of them, my director, you'll appreciate the story. My director came in and did my formal observation 3 weeks into the school year. Now here I am, a virtual teacher, working with a rubric, I'm gonna get observed with a rubric that doesn't exist. So I'm like, I don't even know how to prepare for this. This is so like not normal. Right. So I came up with a system that I'm using now. And she came in and I said, okay, you're going to see connection problems. The internet could go down. I'm going to get kicked out of the classroom. I mean, any number of things could happen. Long story short, my lesson started 10 minutes late. I had to modify my already edited lesson as I was going. I had video clips, I had all these other things. So I had to modify everything in real time as I was teaching, get them to the end so that when I asked them that final closing question, basically have them, be able to answer it. Not only did I finish the lesson, with the edited version, I got to the end, and when I closed them, they all got the right answer. My director almost fell out of the chair. She's like, I have no idea how you did that. And I said, well, what really it is? I think it's kind of like what I talked about before with that structure. You kind of dissect what you really feel you need, like you break it down into simple terms, what it is that your kids really need. And then you sort of build from there, but you can't escape the fact that you have to know your audience as well. With me, it's middle school kids. Middle school kids on your best day when they're live, they have like a 7-minute attention span. So imagine dealing with that online. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I have a lot of visual things that I've come up with. I'd love to share them with you. They've been a great help to me.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what we've been doing really since October, is trying to have all the professors update everything online. So all of my classes are online. We have a Zoom license for all the professors. So we're using Zoom a lot, which I think has been helpful with breakout rooms. I do teach a first-year seminar, so I'm trying to use breakout rooms as a way for students to get to know each other. So I usually do at least one activity where they're talking about something. I give them a topic just to try to kind of recreate some of that bonding that would be happening in student life, that would be happening with their residence halls. But I'm trying to do it more in classes, and also to assign them group projects so they really have to spend time together. But I think that really the small size of Elmira, and you as alums know what it's like to be connected to your professors, that really is the strength of our program and why I love my job, because I do still have graduates who text me about things that are happening in their classes, who text me about things that are happening in their life, and that it just feels like that human connection, which, when I think about what has 2020, what have I realized from 2020? I also think I realized that I feel grateful for the human connection that comes from being at a small school and the kind of experiences that you have. For those of you who graduated a while ago, one thing that we have been implementing in recent years is going on term 3 trips for education specifically. So when Tyler was at EC in 2016, we went to France, Italy, and Switzerland, and went to the UN in Switzerland. And then in 2018, I took students to Finland, and we observed schools in Finland. And we went to Norway and Sweden, and I did a exchange with the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, where I lectured to their education students, and their professors lectured to our education students who were there. So it was a really great exchange. And so I guess I feel really grateful for those kinds of experiences as well. And when I think about the future, and in a pandemic-free world, that's something that I invested in building again, because I feel like it's the place where students really grow. There is that opportunity for growth. So when I'm thinking about Giving Tuesday coming up, I always give on Giving Tuesday to EC, and I earmark my dollars to term 3 travel. So I specifically write in there, I want to buy someone dinner on their term 3 trip. So I think that that's kind of moving forward. When I think about 2020 and EC, it just renews my enthusiasm for all the things we get to do. Sometimes what happens in your job is things start to be like a burden, like this is something I have to do. And then when it all gets taken away and you're not allowed to travel and you're not allowed to see students in person and you're not allowed to meet with them in office hours, all of a sudden it's like, oh, when this is over, those are things I'll get to do again. So I'm in a way, it makes you grateful for the opportunities that your job gives you. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I know we're going to open it up to questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that people have about like what's going on in campus now or what's going on with the education program. I do want to leave time for questions because we are already over time. So I don't want to talk too much.
There's no real end time. We just kind of give that as a little bit of a guideline. So, you know, as long as the conversation is flowing and we have participants, we're happy to stay. So we are to the point of open conversation and questions. I did have one come in via chat, but I think we should, since it's a fairly small group, we should be able to just manage it, you know, taking turns. But I want to hit this one on the chat just so I don't lose it. This is for Jennifer. The question is, how has feedback from parents been? It says you are giving students great resources. Will you be using these formats when we return to in-person classes?
That is such a great question. You know, what's interesting is that the virtual visual things that I shared, those ideas were, oh, can you hear me? Okay. Those ideas were born out of things that I was doing, that I have been doing for years now. So my challenge was, how do I take what I've been doing that I know has been working so well? I actually just got an email from a mom today of a student I had last year. And if you remember, you know, with us being shut down from March to June and nobody was prepared for that, we were all sort of in shock and scrambling and trying to figure out, you know, how to continue to do the best that we could and stay connected with our kids. And this mom told me her son, when I had him, when he started out, he was an honor student, could be a little on the lazy side though. But he actually really embraced the idea of using the resources that I gave him because it gave him, you know, kind of something to hold on to. Like he never felt intimidated by any task I gave him, even the most challenging of things. He never really sort of shied away from them, or he got so much better at, you know, embracing them because of the fact that he felt that he had resources. So she wrote me a letter today or an email and said she wanted to let me know he just finished, well, he's a 9th grader now. He just finished Q1 in Honors Global Studies and he got a 95 for the whole quarter. And she credits that to me, which I thought was really nice. But those resources that I shared have helped at this point, probably 5 years worth of kids go to high school more comfortable, more confident, feeling more prepared for what lies ahead, whatever the level. I've gotten emails from kids that were my special ed kids that were integrated that shared with me when they went to 9th grade, they felt like the smartest kid in their class because of the fact that they felt, you know, so well prepared by what we had done in social studies. I think the trick is getting them to kind of embrace it while you're going through it because they don't always recognize, you know, the value of what you're doing with them while you're doing it. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a, you know, touch and go kind of thing. But yeah, I think I'm actually going to continue to use my handbook. It really has been a success to take my tools that I would normally give out at a lot of different times and house them all together in the handbook has been really fantastic. But I think my biggest thing that I'm so proud of is the resource for parents, because I think that really has helped so many parents to feel so much more comfortable and connected to their kids during this crazy time in this crazy world that we're in. I actually had a parent conference about a week and a half ago, with a mom who got a little teary-eyed with the entire team. It wasn't just me, but she got a little teary-eyed and she said, my son struggles with school. He has severe anxiety and stress. And she said, you know, this environment, this virtual learning environment that you guys are doing, she said, this is working for him. And she got all choked up. He's doing really well. And so, you know, it doesn't work for everybody. Obviously, not everything works for everybody, but when you have a connection like that, it makes you realize, you know, I'm onto something and what I'm doing is working. And if it's worked for one child, this is the one that I know about, there has to be so many more that it's working for that I don't even know about. And for me, that's motivation to not only to continue to do it or to utilize it in some fashion, but maybe to keep improving upon it, because I'm always the kind of person that thinks that there's a better way to do something. So thank you for the question.
Great. All right, so let's go ahead and open it up just for open chat here on the call. So just a friendly reminder to make sure you take yourself off mute, wait a second, then start talking. I know we should all know that by now, but I know myself included sometimes struggle with that. So
I'm curious about student teaching at Elmira these days, because I know when I was a senior, we student taught our last semester of senior year, and I was the only one out of 5 at Horseheads High School who went into education and taught. So I thought, gee, that might have been a little too late to do student teaching. So I'm curious as to what kind of classroom experiences students have at what stage of their education.
Right. So now we have 100 hours of practicum that start in the sophomore year, and those are embedded in the classes. So the first one happens in fall of your sophomore year. You do 35 hours in a classroom attached to your class that's on inclusive education. So you're working specifically with students with special needs. And then you have 2 practicums in your junior year, one in the fall term, one in the winter, one with your literacy class that's working on literacy skills. And then the other one is in the methodologies classes. Last year for that, we looked at a bunch of different models of education and shadowed teachers in different types of schools. This year, we're going to be doing one-on-one tutoring in that class because of the pandemic. So students will get their own middle school student or high school student to work with on a regular basis to do one-on-one online tutoring. And then student teaching, the first student teaching happens in term 3 of the junior year. That's a shortened student teaching, just 5 weeks. And then it's followed up by a full semester, which can either be the fall or the winter. I push my students to do fall. They can't always do fall. The reason I like them to do fall is because I like them to start at the beginning of the school year when the students are starting, because I think it's harder for students to take you seriously when you come in halfway through the year. So, but if they build their relationship with you as the student teacher at the same time as their classroom teacher, it's usually easier to establish your authority. The second reason is there are so many exams, including the EdTPA portfolio, that takes a lot of time for the students to do, that I like them to have their student teaching finished so that I can kind of mentor them through the process of the EdTPA. And this last year, with the COVID situation, I worked with 3 of my students, and we developed a whole Canvas web page with basically all the things students need to do to pass those exams. So I feel like it's a lot more transparent maybe than when Tyler went through it. You know, now we have all the mistakes we made. We learned how to do it, and now we have videos. I made tons of videos in term 3. That's what I did in COVID. Videos myself on Zoom, and got over it and put it on YouTube. And but yeah, so student teaching, there's a lot more experience in the classroom. You don't quite wait till that 4th year at the end. That's quite daunting, I'm sure.
Thank you.
great question, Gail. Does anybody else have a question or comment, story they'd like to share from their experience? Going once. Carl.
I have a question. Obviously not a teacher in a classroom, but I'm curious just from people that have kind of experienced both sides in terms of in-person instruction, virtual. Is there anything that you've recognized that you didn't expect in terms of even how you interact with students, maybe in a virtual setting, that you did not or haven't really ever gotten when you've worked kind of face-to-face?
That's a really interesting question. Tyler, go ahead. I want to hear your response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's there's going to be a moment for a lot of processing after this is all done. It's we're just kind of going through it, and I think I have a pretty unique lens because in March I was in the Department of Education, public schools, and now I'm at a private school that, you know, talking about just kind of naming it, acknowledging it, right? Like this private school has resources that the DOE just simply didn't, right? So seeing the response to COVID from both angles has been kind of eye-opening. And I think also one of the reasons when we talk about, you know, inequality, right? I've kind of seen it all in the calendar year. In terms of remote versus hybrid, you know, I feel that we're able to deliver a stronger program remotely. Because it's, you know, there aren't necessarily as many interruptions, right? And everybody kind of just comes to the screen, right? Now there's a lot of drawbacks to that. Hybrid has been, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Hybrid has been a real struggle because we have some students that, you know, are coming in person, some that aren't. So it's, you got to be, you know, I'm sure as Jennifer will say too, and can agree with, is like you have to be wearing 3 hats at the same time. And so it's, but what has been surprising me as for me has been the resilience of the students. I think that right now is a really good excuse to just say done, right? And to really check out, especially because of just how long we've been going through this, right? People forget that in March they were saying, this is like, oh, we're shutting down. I know in New York City, they were like, we're shutting down for 2 weeks, but then we'll come back in. And we've never returned. So it's the resilience of the young students, right? Who still show up, are still engaged, are still, you know, and that is what is very inspiring to me, because quite honestly, I wouldn't be able to blame them if they were like, you know what, we're done. Teachers are feeling done. So that's really been the biggest piece for me.
But you know what's interesting too is that I find with my students, I know a lot of the, I talk to teachers all over the United States, you know, Twitter, different groups, different teaching groups I belong to. And one of the biggest things that was discussed all summer long was, you know, how do you recreate these relationships? Like, I can honestly tell you, one of the reasons why I know I was so successful when school shut down was because I had solid relationships with all my students. I mean, I had, when they announced that the grading system was going to be pass fail, and these kids could have just, you know, they could have just washed their hands and walked away, because if they did absolutely nothing, you know, chances are that with what was already done, to some degree, they were still going to be okay. I still had kids that were showing up, that were putting it all in, that were doing the work, that, you know, it was just amazing to me. But that was, I think for teachers everywhere, they felt that that was a testament to the relationships that they had with their students that were built, that they spent 3/4 of a year building. So when you think about starting a new school year with a new group of kids, and how you normally by this point in the year, you know so much about your kids because you have that face-to-face every single day interaction with them. Doing that over a computer is different. Not that it can't be done, but it's just different. It's a different approach. And to your point, Tyler, I think that for me, there have been days where I've been so frustrated. I've been, you know, I've lost my connection 5 times. I've had all kinds of things happen because, you know, again, when you have kids face to face, it's you and them. But now you have a machine that separates you. If there's no internet, if something goes down, if something goes haywire, you've lost everybody. So to your point about the resiliency, I had something happen one day with them. And I think we had class for 6 minutes total in 2-minute increments. Every single one of those 28 kids never left. They could have walked away and went, oh, it doesn't work today. The link doesn't work. I'm leaving. They didn't do that. And I think it's because, too, they recognize that no matter how frustrated I might be on any given day, I do a lot of social emotional stuff with them. I'm always asking them every day, how are you doing? How are you feeling? We're always starting class having some sort of, social emotional conversation. And then we sort of launch into what we're doing. But I think when they recognize that you want to have that relationship with them, that's the gold standard for everything. And even with social studies, teaching social studies face-to-face is one thing, teaching it online is another. And also recognizing the types of kids that you have too. Bayshore is 70% minority. And my kids this year are probably, my roster, if I take a look at it, it's probably 85% minority. So one of the things that I've paid particular attention to, this goes back to the question that was asked earlier in the evening about how are you revamping the social studies curriculum? I don't really even use a textbook anymore, but I spend a lot of time trying to delve into those stories with kids. And I just had a guest speaker actually 2 days ago, a friend of mine who is a brigadier general for the US Army, who's an African American, and he actually was head of US Army Reserve's COVID operations for the entire United States. He came on and spoke to my kids about growing up in Louisiana during the late 50s, early 60s. He actually also he teaches history now down in Florida part-time. He's an adjunct professor and also does one history class at a local high school. So he talked to them about the Reconstruction era. He talked to them about his family. He talked to them about himself, his experiences growing up. And so we had the history, but we had the stories, and it was real. And the kids asked him questions, what was it like for you growing up? What were your experiences? And, again, I think when you go out of your way to make those connections, it's regardless of if you're in person or you're remote, I think that you're amazed. I've been completely amazed at what I've gotten out of these kids. And I think that is, for me, is going to continue to be the biggest challenge moving forward in the current educational environment we're in, is that when I take a look at who my students are individually, their families, their situations, and who they are as a class, I have to respect that. And I think that when you show the kids that you respect that and you want to bring that to them every day in the best way that you know how, it's amazing what you get back, because they'll ride the wave with you. They'll go all the way with you. And in the hardest of times, I think that it's easy for me to say that I've never been prouder to be a teacher, truthfully. I wondered, the teachers among you dealing with the changes you've had to make in your teaching, your classroom, the resiliency and flexibility you've had to have. Do you have support? I mean, I have a good friend who's a teacher, a lawyer, a litigator for Corning Inc. And she, of course, during this time, they're not going to the office, but she checks with the members of her team every day. She checks in with them. So I wonder, do you have any kind of support like that? Or do you feel totally alone? Are you talking about like teaching staff support? Are you talking about administrative support?
Any kind of support. I think I'm thinking more emotional support.
Well, my principal is amazing. She's always checking in with us. She checks in with everybody every week. I mean, she sends out something every week asking everybody, like, check in, how are you doing? But she makes her rounds every day. Like, she tries to get to everybody, at least one visit every 2 days. She's always checking in with people. She made it a point to come to my class the other day when I had the guest speaker, to show her face to the virtual kids, to say hello to my guest speaker, to thank him for being a part of my class and speaking to the kids. My team, I work on a team of teachers. We're actually a school within a school. There's only 15 of us. There are one set of virtual teachers at every grade level, but we're a very close-knit group, the virtual teachers, and then also I teach 8th grade. So we're, the 8th grade teachers. So whether I think about my administration or I think about the teachers that I teach with, everybody is so supportive. I mean, we all recognize that there are days that just feel like they're just never going to end, and everything in the world went wrong today, and it just sucks. You have those days, but you have those days together, and I think that's the biggest thing, is that we all know, everybody knows that we're all there for one another. And and I think that when you work in an environment like that, I think that the kids pick up on that too. The kids recognize that even though we are virtual, we're virtual, all of us, we're still a team. They recognize that we're still a team of teachers. We still talk to each other. We support one another. If things are going on in one person's class with a certain student, we communicate with one another. We talk about what's happening with that student in other classes as well. So we take care of business just like we were face to face. And I think that within that structure, many of the virtual kids, most of the virtual kids and their parents alike and their families have taken a lot of comfort in that. They realize, everybody realizes the struggle is real, but we always end every parent conference by thanking the parents for what they're doing for their kids at home, because we recognize that without their support, especially in a virtual environment, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So it really is a collective group effort. And I really believe that because we're in the environment that we're in, when you get that support, it's easier to give that support, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
I'll just add that, yes, fortunately, I have a wonderful family who's very supportive, wonderful partner who's very supportive. And then, I tend to surround myself with educators, social workers, folks that, have similar, just, they get it, right? You don't need to explain. So yeah, fortunately.
Good, thank you. And I just want to add to, this is open discussion. So if there are people beyond the three presenters who want to share their answers or response or ideas about any of these topics, please feel free. Don't feel like, you can only ask questions. You can, share thoughts as well.
Definitely going back
All
to
right.
the making connections. Like I'm teaching at SUNY Oswego, so I'm higher level, and we can't expect them to turn on their cameras. So I teach to a lot of black boxes with white letters. So it's really trying to make those connections. And I would say that I don't know what 90% of my students look like. And like this week, we're doing our final presentations for class, and somebody turned on their camera and I had to check the name on the bottom real quick. I had no idea who that was. And here we are in the second to last week of classes. So it's been very interesting to engage with them. And, I've asked them to put up pictures and, still the white letters of their name. So it's been definitely interesting. I get student support in my classes because it's transitioning into college. So I'm always writing notes of who's still on campus, who's gone home, because I want to make sure that the class is inclusive. And if, part of their assignment is, attending an experience on campus, making sure that I'm promoting the in-person as well as the online equally. So it's not making the people that are not on campus seem less involved. So positive thing was during one of the presentations today, I teach dimensions of wellness as part of my class. So part of their presentation was how can you help other students if they're struggling in that dimension of wellness? And one of the students says, well, at Oswego, we can. And as soon as they used the word we, and I pointed it out at the end, I said, you used we, and you feel that you're part of this community. And teaching in a virtual setting like that just warmed my heart, because we've never met face to face, but they saw themselves as part of our community. And that was the number one point of our class. So it was just an awesome thing at the end that, they used we, and they connected themselves right to that community without ever seeing their face.
That's awesome. I have a question for you. So you said something about you teach to the black boxes. Is it you are not allowed to require them to turn their cameras on, or they just don't turn their cameras on? I was just curious.
We cannot expect them to turn on their cameras because that would be us. I'm trying to think of the PC way the email told us at the beginning of the semester. It's basically like for us to expect them to show their setting is like a violation of their personal space. And like they should be able to choose themselves if they want to share their space or not.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right, and I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they were doing hybrid, but this week we turned to all virtual, and they're expected to be on camera, and Google Classroom just started with like the blurred background.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, they won't see your dirty clothes on the floor. So that's good. You know, I'm always like checking their space and making sure that things behind them, you know, are clean and stuff, but you know, they're expected to be on camera.
Yeah. So mine are too.
At EC, it's different depending upon the department and the class. There wasn't a rule about that, but most of my students will have the camera on every once in a while. I mean, there are, you know, a few that sometimes leave it off. The other day in my first year seminar, I don't know what it was, but it was like the last week of class or something, and everybody had the black box. And I just said, oh, I feel so lonely. I'm the only face on the screen. And then they all turned their cameras on. So, you know, passive aggressive guilt trip also works.
I was just gonna say,
we did do an icebreaker where we had to have them show a piece of paper and answer yes or no. So they couldn't just say it or type it. So they had to show the paper. Good. And that's what all it was just the paper. But that, you know, that was a little tricky way, but it's been interesting.
Yeah, we're out in Arizona. We're not allowed to tell the kids to turn it on or not. And I mean, I'm at a high school level. I mean, my position isn't a classroom position. I essentially am a guidance counselor for SPED kids, helping them figure out what they want to do after high school. But I pop in and out of other teachers' classes when we were virtual, and I mean, now we're in hybrid, so I run into the classrooms. But but in virtual land and in one colleague that is doing our virtual academy, we don't have to require it. Like the kids, there's plenty of kids that we haven't seen their faces since they were on campus in March.
That's interesting. I just tell them, I all of them, I tell them I'm camera shy. I'm not going to go through this alone. So you have to turn your camera on. I mean, I've tried all kinds of things. You believe it or not, though, I have most of mine turn their cameras on. I don't really have a problem anymore. It was a little bit of an issue in the beginning, but they're all pretty respectful. I mean, there are days where I look at a ceiling or I've got, you know, I'll say, hey, you there? And I get like the hand, like the thumb, you know, I don't see a person. I see like an ear, you know, I get some sign of life. I'm okay with that, you know, as long as I know somebody's there. But it's interesting. I mean, I continue to have conversations with them about the importance of the camera. And again, I think it's about making that connection, because a lot of them, you know, again, they're 8th grade, especially, they're going to, you know, they're in a position where they have the choice. You know, I'm not standing there going, you have to do it this way. You know, they could just say, I don't want to do that. I don't care if she says it or not. I don't have to. So it really is more of kind of like a labor of love. But it's interesting how when you continue to sort of reinforce the idea of the importance of wanting to create that sense of community and trying to recreate that situation where I know we're not all together like we would normally be if we were in a classroom together. But if we're going to recreate what we would have in that situation, we all have to see one another, because that's really, you know, the start of it. So again, it took about a month, I'm not going to lie, but every day was sort of like a little bit of a, you know, 2-minute blurb of the importance of the camera and why we need to have that camera on. And some kids like right away would turn it on, and some it took like at least a week, some it took 2 weeks. But eventually, now I'm at the point where if they have you know, their screen is black, or I'm looking at SpongeBob or whatever it is, when I admit them into the room, 90% of them, the minute I hit admit, their camera goes right on. So, you know, yeah, and I agree. I just see somebody said something about the bandwidth. My school district just did a massive infrastructure upgrade so we could do live streaming, and obviously we have all the virtual teachers that we have. Bandwidth is an issue because when you have all these meets and all these things going on, you know, it does take a lot out of the system. But, and you know, what kids are dealing with at home too, lots of different things, but they're pretty good though. Like if for some reason they can't turn their camera on, they'll tell me in the chat, you know, there's something wrong with my camera, or, you know, we don't have the bandwidth, or something's going on, whatever it is. But again, I think it all goes back to relationships, you know, just knowing that there's always a way in. Sometimes you just have to give it a little bit of time and find your way in. But as soon as you make that connection with your kids, it's amazing. You just feel like, you know, there's nothing that you can't do, whether you're face to face or you're virtual. So pretty cool stuff.
All right. Well, I hate to stop some good conversation, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's evening. Although, Michelle, I know it's early evening for you. We do have a few raffle prizes to give away, so I'm going to throw it over to Ellen, who I think is going to coordinate that for us.
I am. But first of all, just thank you so much to our presenters. This was great. You know, appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. And it was just really a great program. So thank you. I do have two prizes that we'll give out tonight. One is for showing your EC pride. It's a banner. And Arizona, you probably don't need this, but up here we certainly do. A winter hat. So those are our two prizes, and Carl and Sydney are going to assist here.
I was just say, Sydney, are you ready? I have to get my hat. I have to get my EC stuff ready.
I am so ready.
Drum roll.
Well, I can't let the sevens outdo it.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
You know, I'm not eights. They're very competitive.
Mm-hmm. I was like, Michelle, I got you. I got you. Sydney.
Sorry, Carl. Odd eights win.
Whoa.
I think we're
who are
tied.
the orientation leaders for the odd eights? Who taught? I'm thinking like Jen Ross technically taught my class. So.
Oh, well, I trained you guys. So there you
go. Sydney, am I announcing or are you announcing? I'm sorry, I'm not.
You have to pick two numbers between 1 and 13, and I will tell you on my list who falls on those numbers.
Let's see. A number is coming to me. I see it. 7.
7 is Gail.
Woo! Congratulations.
My favorite number. How about that?
One more, Carl.
One more? Okay.
Well, Gail gets to choose first if she would prefer the banner or the hat.
Oh, I don't wear hats, so I guess I'll take the banner.
Okay.
Are we ready for the next number? Let me think. I see another number. 12.
12 is Emily.
Yay.
You'll be able to use that hat, Emily, I'm sure.
Yeah, we don't have any. We had snow in October and then it all melted, but I will be well prepared for when winter settles in up here on Lake Superior. Thank you so much.
Yep. I will get those out to both of you. If not tomorrow, we have following week off. It'll be after Thanksgiving, but I'll try and get them out to you tomorrow.
Perfect. All right. Well,
thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a happy and safe and socially distanced Thanksgiving. Friendly reminder, we are actually taking the month of December off from Young Alumni Calls. You know, I think everybody just has a lot going on, especially with COVID and stuff, and just need to spend some time recharging. So we will be back in January. All right. See everybody later.
Bye, everyone.
Great job. Thank you.
Bye-bye.